Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Online Warriors podcast, the final February episode. February episode. We got a good one brewing here at the end of February. We've been brewing up a nice long podcast poop for the entire month, and here it comes on like the third last day of the month. So you're welcome for that metaphor.
So make sure you have toilet paper in your glove box.
Yeah. Quick shout out on Blue Sky, because we just talked about this before we started recording. Do you keep toilet paper in your glove box?
You should, by the way. So you know how people keep napkins in their glove box? It's basically a roll of napkins. If you need to wipe something down, wipe something up, blow your nose. That's how it came in clutch for me today, because I had a big crusty booger in there that I almost sniffed up, but I needed to get it out. So then I just had that tissue available to get rid of it. Or if you're ever stuck in traffic. So this actually happened to my brother. He was stuck in traffic.
Let me interrupt for 1 second. Everyone has clicked away. So it's just us now. But go ahead.
Okay.
Everyone's clicked away. We talked about boogers. We talked about poop.
Okay. My brother
Everyone's
was
gone.
stuck in traffic for 12 hours and like bumper to bumper, not moving. There was like this crazy storm/accident situation, and he had toilet paper in his glove box and ended up having to like not only use it himself, but pass it around because people were just taking shits on the side of the road.
The same piece of toilet paper? They were just wiping and pass,
It was a roll. It became a community. They started a Discord channel. I mean, if you were part of this traffic, let me know, because it was a big deal. Like, it was like a couple of years ago. If you're listening and you know, give me a shout out in the old Blue Sky, because this happened.
At techtic.bsky.social. Let him know if you were part of that, and also let him know if you have a roll of toilet paper in your glove box. I mean, for me, toilet paper lacks the structural integrity for what I typically do when I need a napkin in the car. When I need a napkin in the car, something's gone wrong. And I need more reliability.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. I have a lot of like McDonald's napkins in my glove box, and I feel like that can do double duty.
You can build up a stash pretty easily. And like the convenience of a roll, I don't think is enough, because rolls is also like,
yeah, but enjoy the asshole chafing when that time finally does come. Enjoy it.
I don't know that it's coming like that. That's I think I'll take the risk. That's kind of what I've been playing. We have at techtic.bsky.social. I am at illeagle86.bsky.social. We have at nerdbomber.bsky.social. And our main show account at onlinewarriors.bsky.social. Getting the bsky handle plugs out of the way early. Before we dive into our topics today, we got some great, juicy, it's been a great week for nerdy news. Andor Season 2 trailer dropped the day of this recording, which is Monday the 24th, dropped around noon today, so we watched that. We'll dive into that. We're going to be talking, I almost said Murderbot, which may potential franchise in the works, but Apple's new sci-fi series Murderbot just got its release date nailed down. We'll talk about that a little bit. But first, before we talk about any of that stuff, I want to talk about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, because we got some news about that over this past week. Actually, news from a couple of places. So the long and short of it, the main, headline up here is that there's a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4 remaster purportedly coming to Xbox Game Pass as well as PS5 and PC in June. And there was also a new Call of Duty map based on a skate park that some eagle-eyed gamer found a poster in there that teased some kind of announcement related to Tony Hawk Pro Skater on March 4th. Nerdbomber later went and found it, I heard, but I don't think she was the first one to find it.
She was the first.
Of course.
I was not.
The common ground here, of course, is that Activision has or had involvement in both franchises, so I think that's why the poster was in the Call of Duty map. The kind of other piece of news here, pro skateboarder Tyshawn Jones, it seems like kind of let the cat out of the bag here. I think there's reason to believe that maybe they didn't intend on announcing. There's rumors that they were intending to shadow drop the game in June. Tyshawn Jones basically said, hey, I'm doing a Tony Hawk Pro Skater remaster. He said on a podcast earlier this week. So there's kind of debates on why this news is coming out now, but I don't care because it's amazing. For those that do not know,
it changed my
so
Friday.
Great.
It literally changed my Friday. Like, I think I sent you guys the news link and then immediately started a 2-hour long update. I might have been even longer than that for Call of Duty to find Tony Hawk. Like, the only thing that I played then was the new skate park map in Call of Duty. And I hadn't really played Call of Duty in like a couple months. So yeah, they made me hyped.
I'm sure that we've talked at least a few times on this show, both when it was announced and probably when at least I played it. The Pro Skater 1 and 2 remaster dropped a few years ago at this point. It had to have been 2021 or 2022. I believe it dropped for $40 originally. That sounds generally correct. Yeah, take my money. Assuming that 3 and 4 is the same price, and even if it's not, they could, hopefully they're not listening. They could charge me more money and I'd probably pay it. I mean, that experience... When I heard this news, and to be clear, I did not actually do this, but like I immediately had the urge to go and play the 1 and 2 remaster again because it was so well done. It was so much fun. It really recaptures the joy of the original games. It's just a pitch perfect remaster. It's coming at the right time. Super excited for 3 and 4. I believe when I was a kid growing up, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 was actually the one that I played the most.
Yeah, that one
so
was
that has me even
goat.
more excited for this. Was that the one with the haunted house? Like the neighborhood, the suburbs?
It had
You
the
go into the haunted house.
suburbs. I can't remember if it had a haunted house, but it definitely had the suburbs. I remember you could be Wolverine. You could be like the devil chick. If you had like the cheat codes, you could be the Neversoft eyeball.
Which one was the one with Darth Maul? One of them.
Darth Maul was in that one too, yeah.
It was sweet. These games just have an electric sense of fun. I will say something that I was, I think, surprised by. I mean, going back into playing the first remaster, I knew I was going to enjoy it. I didn't know I was going to enjoy it that much. You know, when I was a kid, probably mostly because I was a kid, but also just because I was like playing with friends and goofing around. I never really like got into a flow state with it, I think is the terminology I would use. But like as an adult playing the remaster, man, like I would play for hours and like just really like pun intended, like I would grind. Like I would be grinding, like trying to get higher scores, you know, unlock new levels, stuff like that. Like it's a very, very simple premise for a game, very well executed. I think it helps a lot that Tony Hawk has said many times and has demonstrated many times through his actions that like he cares very deeply about this franchise, even still today. It celebrated its 25th anniversary last year. The original did, and he still like is so into it, cares a lot about it.
We had talked
Like-
about this a little bit on when we did the WWE announcement. It's that these games where you get to insert yourself into this professional career and go through and kind of give it your all. I mean, it's role playing. It's an RPG in sports, and these type of games do it so good, like way better. And again, I'll say this again, way better than the Maddens and things like that, because it's like you can't
They're
have
individually driven.
you can't have the Incredible Hulk playing, you know, hockey. You just the
You
amount
could.
of like, but they haven't let us yet. But the amount of like customization and like personalization that you get to do in your individual character, these games slap. This is awesome.
So I'm going to combat you a little bit. I actually think when they started adding more RPG elements into the Tony Hawk games, when you're getting into like Underground, and there was another like franchise offshoot, I think that's when the franchise and the IP kind of started to go downhill a little bit.
Underground was my favorite.
See, I thought Pro Skater.
You can't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
That's you can't. And
I
like
think Pro Skater, like it didn't have a story, and I think that was what was so great about it. It was just task based. Like there were things you tried to accomplish, and yeah, you could like level up your skater, but like I didn't have to worry about a story. I could, like you said, Illeagle, like you could get into a flow state easier. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the pinnacle of
it's
the
an arcade
franchise.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, like and I think like I know Skate is a franchise that has a lot of diehard fans, and that is a franchise that I think, you know, and it's not to say that Tony Hawk Pro Skater doesn't care about the technical aspects of skateboarding and stuff, but like Skate, I've never played it, but I imagine it's kind of like that, right? Where it takes it a little bit more seriously. You're building a career, you're doing all these things. Like to me, the experience peaks at just a full arcade. Like there's progression, like you unlock levels and you try to like get to the end of the game basically, but you're not developing a character. You're really just playing, and as you play and as you go through different levels and as you try to accomplish more things, like you said, it's task based, like you just kind of get better at the game naturally without being driven by some story or long form narrative to do so, right? And I think that's effective here. Like I am rarely the kind of person who like, and I think Nerdbomber, you're the same way. Like it's rare for us to shy away from story in a game, but like, yeah, it doesn't need a story. Like it's just, I don't know, maybe it's a nostalgia thing too. I mean, there's definitely an aspect of it that's nostalgia in terms of why I like playing it, but it's just super effective. And like, I do think, and you know, companies certainly show this when they, do something like invest in a 3 and 4 remaster. Like, I think the 1 and 2 remaster did pretty well from a financial perspective, and like
I think it blew
reinvigorated the
everyone's
genre.
expectations.
What I would love to have happen, and I don't know that this is ever going to happen, but like after 4, was there a Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5, or was that when they started going into Underground and all the other iterations? I honestly don't know off the top of my head.
I can't remember, but I think that's when they started going off into the other iterations.
Because what I would wonder is, okay, so let's think down the road here a little bit. Let's say the 3 and 4 remaster comes out and does as well or even better. What happens then? Because like I would like for something more to come from this team, but I worry that they would bite off more than they can chew again, So
Pro Skater 5 came out in 2015, and I actually do vaguely remember this coming out, and I don't think I bought it though, which is weird because I definitely was in the range when I probably would have bought something like this.
You were big in shooter games at that point in your life.
Potentially. But I think I didn't buy it though because it was pretty bad. Like it got heavily panned.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I don't think they did anything after that.
There would have had to have been a pretty big gap between 4 and 5, right? I mean, 2015 was a long ways away.
Pro Skater 4 was 2002, so over a decade.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it almost sounds like they tried, rather than do a remaster, because back in 2015, remasters were not the sexy thing in the gaming world. Like, they were like, well, let's not remaster it, but let's try and recapture it in some way, right? I'd say fairly clearly didn't work, and like I would hope they wouldn't do a Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5 remaster after 3 and 4. I would hope what they would do is they would sit down and say, okay, both of those remasters worked, and now, I think they would have runway to do something new, but they would want to do something new in the same spirit, as those remasters. I don't know that would happen. But
it's not the same company, obviously, but I would love for somebody to remaster Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure. Did either of you play that?
No.
No, I've never even heard of that.
It was amazing.
It's a deep cut.
It was amazing. They basically, I think they actually used the Tony Hawk Pro Skater engine, and you could be Disney characters and skate around Disney worlds. It was great. Especially like when I was coming off the heels of Kingdom Hearts. I think my parents got me that game, and I loved Tony Hawk and I loved Kingdom Hearts, and I was like, this is fantastic.
Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure is a 2003 skateboarding game developed by Toys for Bob.
Yeah, buddy.
I'm not making that up. Toys for Bob. But yeah, I do see Vicarious Visions, and I believe they were the ones that did do the Tony Hawk games, along with Neversoft, which has been out of business for like a billion years.
That was my nickname in high
school. Yeah, it's hilarious. I think it begs the question, I mean, again, assuming that 3 and 4 remaster comes out and is, again, super successful or more successful, like it begs the question, I don't know that the market for these games is particularly hot right now, or games like this that are like skating games or snowboarding games. Like there used to be a lot of snowboarding games too, and I don't think there are now. So like it kind of begs the question, can those experience a resurgence? And I think in particular it's worth asking that question because I have to imagine, most video game companies these days, obviously the main thing they're thinking about is making money, which, blah, 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 capitalism. But like one of the main ways that they stand to make money these days, it seems like a lot of the time, is microtransactions. I feel like, and by God, I am not telling you to do this with the remasters, Activision. I am not.
But it is. You're onto something.
You could microtransact the bejesus out of a game like this.
That and
right?
snowboarding games. Like it just...
Well, I think in my personal opinion, especially you look at the success of SSX. That's really difficult to say. Success of SSX.
Yeah.
I think what happened
Good
to
job
that
not
franchise,
saying sex at any point in there, by the way.
I did my
really
best.
Impressive.
But what happened, if you look back at how that franchise evolved, when I think it was the PS4 and Xbox One era, they came out with an
SSX tricky.
You're doing great.
They came out with an SSX game called just SSX, and they kind of tried to make it more realistic and less arcadey. And I think they lost why people loved those games. And the same thing I think can be said for skateboarding as well. Like people love doing ridiculous shit with their friends, pulling off tricks. And I get some of it too, was just that as a culture, we kind of I don't want to say aged out, but like skating and snowboarding, like I remember the X Games was huge. Like Brink was a big Disney Channel original movie. People really were into the X Games type stuff in the 90s and the early aughts. And I think that kind of fizzled away, but also getting rid of the fun arcade style of those games couldn't have helped.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're onto something that like late 90s, early 2000s, like franchises like SSX and Tony Hawk Pro Skater, like they were motivated by the overarching cultural movement that like, yeah, made the X Games super popular. And like there was I mean, one of the other things I think about when I think about Tony Hawk, I know a lot of people feel the same way, is like the soundtracks for those games.
So
like,
good.
What's
so many great songs, like The Offspring and like all this music, and like it just, I don't know if you could make the same, it's silly to say, but like I don't know if you could make the same sort of game now, because I don't know what the music would sound like.
Because I feel like, and this just might be in my bubble, but I feel like roller skating is becoming hot again. Is it? And I think you could do it with roller skating. I think you could.
Yeah, I don't know that there's ever been a game that is centered on.
There has been a rollerblading game. It was not good.
Because the soundtrack
yeah,
was
I mean,
it came out around the time. The one that I played, I can't remember the name of it, but again, it was something my parents got me because they knew I liked Tony Hawk, and it was very underwhelming. That and like the BMX games, all super underwhelming.
Yeah, and SSX, I mean, you mentioned that last one to come out, 2012, got good reviews from what I can see, but it was the last one. Like they just, I don't know, they lost something. Like maybe culturally we moved on. Like I don't know. Like I am inclined to look at this and say like, yeah, I want more of this, but maybe we want more of this just because of the nostalgia, right? And I don't know if video game companies are going to buy into that fully, in the sense of giving you a brand new rendition of it. You know, the remasters are fun and they can make a chunk of change from it. It wouldn't surprise me at all, you know, if they just moved on at the end of that. I would hope
Jet Set
they would.
Radio was like, a roller skating game. That was great.
Tony Hawk is also like, and I'm not throwing shade here, but isn't he like kind of old? Like, how much longer is he going to be doing all this? You know, I do kind of wonder that too. Love these games so much. It's the, you know, again, the news here is super positive. They're 3 and 4. It sounds like is imminent. I mean, like a week from when this episode drops, we're going to get a whole video about what's coming. I would assume it's just going to be like, hey, there's a 3 and 4 remaster. Here it is. It looks awesome. And then we'll all line up to buy it in June. Or if you're, you know, an Xbox Game Pass user, you just kind of get it. So yeah, rejoice. I don't know. It's going to be awesome. Shout out Tony Hawk. You do good stuff. Also really great internet vibes from what I remember. I'm not on Twitter anymore, but he had a really great Twitter. Let's talk about Andor, because Andor is sitting in a very rare place for me. I was thinking about this today after I watched the trailer. I think Andor is the last show on Disney Plus that I care about. Like, I don't know that I could name another one, in particular in the Star Wars side of things, that I care about. You know, my experience with Andor, we'll get to yours in a second, because I don't remember if you guys have watched it or not. But for me, Andor is the show that, you know, I went through The Mandalorian, I watched the Book of Boba Fett, I watched the Obi-Wan series, and like I kind of burned out on the Star Wars shows because they were getting kind of rough. And then someone said, hey, you really need to watch Andor. Like I know the rest of the stuff's getting bad, but this is different. It's very good. You got to make sure you watch this. And I waited a pretty long time. I want to say I didn't watch Andor until probably late 23, early 24. And first of all, if for anyone who hasn't watched the first season, it is as good as people say it is. I mean, so have you guys watched it?
No, we haven't.
No, we're kind of living through you.
It's as good as people say it is. And it is very, I feel like, you know, people in today's social and political climate, people make a lot of Star Wars comparisons. And
go on.
I don't know that Andor is purposefully making hay from that, but they sure could be, because, you know, the time frame in the lore in which it takes place, like it's very focused on the early. It's a prequel to Rogue One, essentially. So it's very like, hey, the Empire is very oppressive, blah blah blah. Like, we need to start a rebellion, and this is how it starts. It starts very small. It starts with underground spy networks. It doesn't start with a rebel base and like fighting the Death Star. Like, there's a long way to go before you get to that point. And seeing that unfold in a particularly gritty way and with very, very well developed characters and incredible acting is very effective. And the good news for fans of the show, or people like you who I would hope would eventually watch the show, is that the season 2 trailer, it looks like intends to retain all of the characters that you've come to connect with in the first season, and B, really double down on that energy. I think Andor to me is in the very similar spot to Severance, which is it just came back and it's doing very well. It's very good still. This show has been gone for a long time and I almost forgot how great it was. And then I watched this trailer and I was like, oh yeah, this show was really good. And this trailer is part of the job of this trailer is to kind of remind me how good it was and get me excited for more of it. I would say Stranger Things, it's the same sort of thing. The season gaps are so long that the trailer's job is not just to tease the next season, but also be like, hey, remember this? It was great. It's kind of serving double duty there.
They did lean into all of the critical acclaim. I felt like it was one after another of just quotes of, this show is so awesome. You should watch it.
I mean, it's kind of their only show now that people actually like and is good. So it kind of makes sense for them to do that. There were, I know The Acolyte had a big fan following and it ultimately got canceled and people didn't like that. But I also don't remember the reviews for it being as good. I mean, Andor's reviews were this show is amazing.
But
and
so
again,
was the Mandalorian's
out,
reviews. Does it make you nervous that they're going to fall into the same?
Good question. I'm certainly always wary of that with Disney properties now. I think, The Mandalorian had a lot of good things going for it. Where they struggled was when they started getting back to Jedi. What I saw from this trailer for season 2, Andor still has no intent to move in that direction, and that is the correct choice. I've staunchly said this about The Mandalorian. When The Mandalorian's first trailer came out, I think I literally said on this show, this is great, there's going to be no Jedi. Obviously, with Baby Yoda, that was blown to hell, after literally one episode. But even having Baby Yoda around for cuteness factor and occasional use of the Force was, obviously super effective for The Mandalorian, right? It was when they got Luke back involved, when Ahsoka became involved, when they started digging into that lore a little bit more, it lost steam for me because the show and the premise of the show, which at its face was very simple, started to fracture a little bit. Andor is a little different because Andor, I think, immediately produced a fairly layered plot and set of storylines, but it did so in a part of the Star Wars timeline that is very compelling. So I don't think they have the same set of problems as The Mandalorian did. And also, again, I would say that so long as they keep away from Jedi and the Force, I'm just always going to be more interested. So, I think this is going to be good. The trailer was very well cut. I thought the music that was used was awesome too. Just the vibe of it was really great. So, I don't know what you guys would have taken away from it, not having seen season 1. Obviously, not a lot of specific stuff happens in the trailer that you can point to, but
you do take away from the vibe of the timing of relative to the current social climate. So even if you haven't seen season 1, it is doing a very good job at drawing you in.
I'll also say I can't remember another Star Wars property using actual music. And I say actual music like a song that they
Steve
have
Earle.
to license. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like
for
everything is scores or something within the Star Wars universe that already exists. And so I thought immediately that grabbed my attention just because it's very unique for a Star Wars property.
The writing of season 1 of Andor, it focuses, I think, a lot less on the we're in a rebellion, woohoo! We're fighting oppression. It focuses a lot less on that and a lot more on the oppression part, which maybe doesn't sound particularly enlivening, but it's super, super compelling drama a lot of the time. In particular, Stellan Skarsgård's performance in that show is amazing. He has a bunch of monologues and, he represents a tortured character who is trying to helm the rebellion, but he also knows that it's going to take so much effort and so long to get off the ground that he will probably never reap its benefits. So he's kind of this tortured character throughout all of it, and he's back in season 2, obviously. I guess for you guys, this presents some spoilers in that if you ever watched season 1, you may remember seeing some people in this trailer and be like, oh, well, they survived. But
My
still
memory is
think
not
it's
that
worth
good
going back
anymore.
and watching it. I mean, I feel like this is just turning into me doing an advertisement for how great Andor is, but it really is that good. Even if you just watch certain episodes from season 1 that are particularly good, I think you'll find it worthwhile. Season 2 is going to be amazing. I'm looking now. I don't know if we know when it's coming out yet, but apparently, too, this is worth noting, it was planned by the creator as a 2-season series.
So this could be it.
This could be it. They never really like confirmed that in the trailer, but it sounds like they are intending for this to maybe be the last season. It premieres April 22nd on Disney Plus. I actually think I'm gonna like maybe show up right away for this one. Like I might watch it week over week. So yeah, shout out to Andor season 2. I think it's gonna be great. I would definitely recommend that you guys and all the listeners who haven't watched it yet give it a watch. But also, I can't tell you what to do. So I don't know. Just do what feels right. That brings us to our break, or the time in our show in which we take our break. That is to say, before we take our break, though, I have to shout out our fantastic Patreon producers. Very thrilled these days to be able to say producers with an S. Our good friends, Mr. Stephen Keller, Mr. Void Weldy, our two knights, stalwart and honorable as always, sitting at our table holding swords. You guys get the gist. These guys support us over on our Patreon at the highest of our 3 levels of support. They get this shout out every episode. They, of course, get access to the monthly secret segment and the monthly vlog, the occasional guest spot on the show as well. You want to be a knight. That's, again, the highest of the 3 levels. There's also a squire level of support, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment and the monthly vlog. And there is a page level, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment. We just recorded a secret segment before this. We talked about conspiracy theories that we just might believe in. So if you're interested in hearing about that, or in, I don't know, seeing a cool vlog every now and again, cool secret segment every now and again, you can head over to patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast. Grab the details there. Say hi to all of us, our producers, as well as the 3 of us. Consider giving back to the show and keeping the mics running. You know, electricity costs money, et cetera, et cetera. So again, that's patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast. Thanks again to Stephen Void. We will be right back to talk about Murderbot.
Hey there, everybody. Seth Heasley here from the Hugo's There podcast. Every month on the podcast, I have on a guest, and we discuss their choice of the winners of the Hugo Award for Best Novel. So if you are interested in nerdy books and nerds discussing books, head over to hugospodcast.com or search for Hugo's There anywhere you get your podcasts. Thank you so much.
All right, we are back to talk about Murderbot. Yes. This is a show that Nerdbomber is apparently excited for. It's coming May 16th to Apple TV+. This is a book that I told Nerdbomber either today or yesterday. I have had this book, the first book, which is called All Systems Red, in my, like, for those that don't know, Libby is like a library app where you can like rent ebooks and put them on your Kindle and stuff. I've had the first Murderbot book in my Libby queue for like 6 months, and I still don't have it yet.
Dude,
because so many people want it.
I learned to read for this book.
I'm telling you, for $40, you can get the box set of, I think, the first 4 books. Infinitely worth it.
Too much commitment. I don't even know if I'm going to like it.
It's not.
I think I know, but
all right. You guys know how I can't read. I burn.
It's not a
through
length
these
thing.
books. It's not a length thing. It's not a commitment at all. You can get through all of these books very quickly.
If you're scared you won't like it,
financial commitment.
I mean, $40
for not knowing.
is.
But I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna like it. Let's not.
Have
fight.
you
Let's not fight.
gone to
fight
a
about it.
physical library and seen if they had it?
Sorry, what is this? 1812? No. What? A physical books?
Physical books. Physical library.
Oh my stars! No, I still read physical books a lot, guys. Don't get it turned. Don't get it twisted. I just haven't gone to a physical library in a hot minute, which, you know, maybe I should. Maybe that would be good for me.
You should.
To be around the books. I don't know. It's funny. Like, I probably do know. Like, I haven't gone on their website from the library, my local library, and like looked if they actually have the physical copy. I probably should do that. But anyways, Murderbot. Let's get back to Murderbot. A sci-fi thriller comedy based on Martha Wells' book series. I don't know how many books are in the series, but this is a series. We announced the TV series, or we didn't announce it. We're not that important. But when it was first announced or first rumored way back when, we did talk about this on the show. I remember because at the time, Alexander Skarsgård, who I recently watched in Succession, was already attached, presumably to play the titular Murderbot. I guess I don't know that for sure, but I would assume the titular Murderbot is the same character, or is the main character. So sci-fi, thriller, comedy. I know the gist here, but I'm going to kind of turn it over to you guys who have both read it. Nerdbomber seems like she's brimming with excitement.
So can I cut in?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Cool.
How dare you?
So what's really, you keep referring to it as a comedy, and where the comedy really shines in this is in the Murderbot's internal monologue. And the thing about that and why it is he's almost like he just wants to be left alone. He doesn't like interacting with people or socializing. And I think the way that they execute that internal monologue is absolutely critical, because when done right, it is absolutely hilarious. I found myself chuckling out loud on this. And a lot of this was like under the situation of this like really intense action sequence. And he's just like, oh, well, I hope I don't have to make eye contact with them while saving their lives. And it's just this like, I don't want to say juxtaposition, but it's this hilarious juxtaposition between like this weird, hilarious, socially awkward commentary with explosions. And it's just, it comes together to make a really fun story.
And I think one of my other favorite things is because it is, it's supposed to be like an AI robot thing that gains free will. Like the way that the book examines humanity and what's going on around it feels like you're kind of looking at humankind from a third person perspective. And it just brings, I'm going to say it again, a different perspective to the human existence. And like Techtic said, it's super sarcastic and super funny. And Murderbot. So like, you guys know me. I read like 35 to 40 books a year, right? And this is still, I've read all of the books in this series, minus the one that came out, I think, in the last like 12 months. I've read them straight through, and they still to this day are probably my favorite books that I've read in the last like 5 years. They're so good.
So getting into the Apple TV Plus of it all, we should, what has your guys' experience been like with Apple TV Plus? Because, obviously it's a streaming service that has heavy hitters like Severance right now, Ted Lasso previously, of course. There's a bunch of other shows on it. I would say as we get away from the quote unquote heavy hitters, I get into more nebulous territory with it where I've had some up and down experiences. I watched Silo season 1, which I thought was fine, but I haven't watched season 2 and I'm not sure I really intend to. I've watched a couple miniseries on it, but I don't know in particular in the area of sci-fi. I know they also did a Blake Crouch book.
Yeah, Dark Matter.
It's titled Dark Matter. So like they're definitely getting it seems like they're leaning pretty heavy into sci-fi, or maybe that's just my perception. And I don't know if I can fully trust the cut of their jib.
See, so I also read the entire Silo series, and when that adaptation came out on Apple TV, I think my biggest beef with it was how dark it was in terms of like literally visually dark. Like I could not see things that were happening on the screen at times. And I even like messed with the TV settings and I still couldn't see. But I think that it was still a pretty decent adaptation of the books. And I don't know, I haven't watched Dark Matter yet, but I also read and loved that book as well. So I know they're working on, or maybe the second season just came out. So I was kind of holding off to see, how the entire series plays out before I jump into it. But I will say, I feel like most of the things that I watch on Apple TV Plus are pretty high quality. Like there's nothing that I've watched where I'm like, this is junk. The people who own the IP should be embarrassed to be associated with this adaptation. Like there's nothing like that. I think for the most part, I've been happy with everything that I've seen on Apple TV Plus. And it also helps, like, I don't think I've paid for Apple TV Plus every time. Like I got my iPhone, I think I got like a year maybe of free Apple TV Plus. And then when that expired, I got another 6 months to a year from PS5. And then when that expired, I got another trial through Target. And then when that expired, they were like, please come back. Here's another 3 months. So I've never paid for it. So the quality for payment is pretty good.
We've talked about it on the show before. I mean, I think Apple TV Plus's biggest problem is that they don't advertise well. They have, if you were to go on Apple TV Plus right now, because my wife recently did this, like you would be pretty floored by how many like movies and shows are on there, in particular movies that like have very talented casts, very big name actors, oftentimes taking advantage of like known IP, and you just don't know about it because it kind of just like quietly released in 2022 and they kind of made no fanfare about it. I don't know. It's that, to me, that's their single biggest problem. I don't know it's necessarily their biggest problem with shows. I mean, we're hearing about this one, certainly. We are kind of dialed into it, but we are hearing about it. So I have always felt like they're, as you said, their production value is pretty high. Like Silo, without having read the books, I feel like it did care about the source material and it was well produced. And I think a lot of the, crime dramas I've watched on there, Presumed Innocent was one I recently watched on there. Also watched the one with Chris Evans' son. I cannot remember the name of it, where his son commits a crime and he's a lawyer. pretty good. So I've watched a lot of good stuff on there. I don't know. My perception of it, I think, is different than a Netflix for whatever reason, where I kind of just sit down on Netflix, see what's on, and then kind of pick something haphazardly. I don't really do that with Apple TV Plus.
I think it's because
I need to have more intent when I go there.
It does feel more intentional. Like Netflix, there's just a ridiculous amount of content that you can pick from. So no matter what you're in the mood for, you can find something. And half the time it's just subpar. But I feel like a lot of Apple TV, like it's very high production quality. And even like the time between seasons, they're not churning things out.
It's methodical. I
agree. It is extremely methodical.
Yeah, they don't swing at every pitch, which I'm sure is to their credit. It just, I think, changes my perception of them in an interesting way.
I will say, if you enjoy comedies, because I feel like we've talked about a lot of like the sci-fi heavy hitters, but Loot and Shrinking, we've talked about Shrinking on this before, but
yeah,
like
Shrinking
Mythic
I do
Quest,
love. I forgot to mention Shrinking. I do love that show.
Mythic Quest is phenomenal, and there's a new season releasing right now, and Trying is another good show. Like there's a lot more content than you would think, and honestly, I feel like people are missing out.
They also kind of strike me as like the Nintendo of the streaming services, where they're kind of just like, I think part of the reason they don't advertise as much is they're like, we already got all our people. We got all of our, Apple heads in here, and we're just going to ride with that audience. And, maybe that is effective. I have no idea. But just an interesting approach to the entire streaming game, I guess. So yeah, May 16th, 2025, Murderbot comes. 2 episodes dropping that day, followed by new episodes every Friday through July 11th. 10 episodes total in the first season. So that brings us to, what are you up to Wednesday? This is the part of the show where we talk about what we've been up to. I definitely went first last week, so I'm going to go not first today. I'm going to see what my guy Techtic is up to.
Heyo.
Heyo.
All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is I started reading a textbook. I recently got humbled as far as my foray into indie game design, in that I'm just kind of like learning and riffing, and I'm not really following a methodical approach. And so I said, you know what? Time to buckle down and go through the steps as a student would, as a in-training developer would. So I started reading The Art of Game Design. This is a textbook that Nerdbomber got me on Christmas. Kind of a dorky gift, but it's awesome, and I love that she's fostering my hobbies. So about 3 chapters in so far, it's kind of establishing that I've got a good foundation so far and making me feel validated. And there's a bit of philosophy though behind it too, which I am finding kind of interesting. So going through that. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about is we watched a movie, Flow. This was on HBO Max.
Cute cat. Cute animated cat.
It is a cute animated cat. There is 0 dialogue. And the animation was fun. There was a lot of subtle messaging that kind of like pulled on your heartstrings. But there was also like some things I felt like that I might have missed in the messaging that was provided, because it was really like, I think it was trying really hard to make you like feel introspective. And I think some of them might have missed me. I don't know. What is your thoughts, Nerdbomber?
I really enjoyed it. I think I got the messaging. Essentially, the point of the story, or the entire story, is it seems like it's a post-apocalyptic Earth where humanity is no more, and all that's left is their baubles, their buildings, and the crumbles of their civilization, but all the animals are still left behind. And there's a massive flood, so a bunch of animals from different walks of life, so a capybara, a cat, crane, a lemur, and a golden retriever, all basically end up on a boat to try to survive this massive flood. And there's found family elements, like accepting death, ruin, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of messaging, and because there's no dialogue, you're getting a lot from the visuals and just watching what happens.
And a bit of it, I think, was I was kind of fixated on like, well, how does this flood happen? What's the science behind it? And maybe that's why some of the messaging, like I got the messages that you had just mentioned, family, acceptance, etc. But there was like some weird ones at the end that I feel like it was almost like you want to make sure that you get every bit out of this, and like you feel kind of like cheated if you miss something. So,
and I feel like that's the benefit though of it being on a streaming service. Like if you're somebody who has the time and likes to rewatch movies, I feel like there's a lot of symbolism that you wouldn't get necessarily the first time around. Like there's stuff you're bound to have missed. So a second watch through, probably you get a lot out of.
Yeah, so a couple notes. First of all, Nerdbomber, clutch use of the word baubles. I don't know if I've ever heard that word used in a sentence that effectively.
I love me some baubles.
In your mini review. Techtic, circling back to you reading the textbook. I've never done that in a non-class environment where I didn't have to do homework. I'm just kind of, I don't need an answer to this question right now, but assuming that you're not like doing homework from it, like, how effective is that? How effective do you find it? I'm going to check back with you because I think that's a very interesting.
So
it's something that I'm open to doing at some point, but I've never really done it.
Professionally, I'm in a bit of an R&D field, and so I also do it as part of my day job. So I'm a bit in practice on reading textbooks and gleaming information from it. So
we have on our
I
bookshelf.
do find it effective, I guess.
Like, when you go into someone's house and you look at their bookshelf and it kind of gives you like insight and a little bit of a picture of like what kind of stuff they enjoy reading. You
can judge them.
Yeah. And our downstairs living room is basically textbooks.
Yeah, and even beyond that, this isn't the first time I've done this just as a hobby. I mean, I have Arduino cookbooks and things like that. It's something that I've always kind of gravitated to it, so it was very much spot on for Nerdbomber getting me that gift.
Shout out Nerdbomber. And also going back to Flow, I believe it won the Golden Globe for like best animated feature. I think it's also the favorite to win the Oscar. So yeah, I would probably benefit from watching it myself. So shout out to that movie. Nerdbomber, you want to keep us rolling here?
All right. So we started watching Love is Blind, the newest season. And I mean, it's your standard Love is Blind fare. The season is not over yet. I think there's another set of episodes that's going to drop towards the end of this week. So it's not completed. I don't know who gets married yet. I will say, I feel like this is probably the most vanilla batch of contestants so far.
Literally.
Like that too. There's not a whole lot of diversity to be seen.
I've heard that.
But even in terms of like, usually there's a lot of drama. There's like crazy love triangles where then, once they get to the honeymoon vacation, they all get drunk and like stuff just blows up. And you don't have a lot of that. And I would even say the season felt a little slow because I'm assuming since there was no drama really, and not to spoil stuff, but like there's not a ton of drama in the honeymoon stage of the show. So a lot of it is focused on the conversations in the pods. And I don't think there's ever been a season where 6 whole episodes are dedicated to watching people talk in the pods. And the episodes are longer than an hour this season. So it's just a lot of pod time. And I mean, they're good conversations and stuff, but there's nothing super like saucy. You know what I mean? I will say,
where does it take place this season?
This one is in Minnesota.
Minnesota.
And there are some people who have very thick Minnesota accents. So it's very evident. And you know how one of the best parts about Love is Blind is the crappy, cheesy music where they're like, oh my God, I have this bracelet from my grandmother and she left it to me when she died. And then the theme song comes in. It's like, my grandmother's bracelet means so much to me. So they must have increased their music budget because they're rocking with like Billie Eilish and Ariana Grande and Justin Bieber. And it's very, very jarring because like I'm over here expecting the dumbest music known to man, and then we're getting like Birds of a Feather, and it's just very confusing to me.
Yeah, I'm probably supposed to know that song and who sings that song.
I'm singing a lot today, I feel like, but yeah, Google. I'm not going to sing it anymore, but Google the song. You'd probably know it. It was all over the radio.
We've been down this road.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm much of a radio
guy. Your wife
guy,
probably has listened to it, so you probably hear it in your house.
I'm certain that she has.
And then the non-Love is Blind thing that I've been doing is I finished The Plague Dogs, which is by Richard Adams, who wrote Watership Down. And this is a book that Techtic got me for Christmas or maybe my birthday. I can't remember what holiday, but he got it for a holiday recently. And it is very, very still relevant to today. The book is set, decades ago, and yet there are elements of this novel that ring true. And like there are things that I was like, damn, nothing has changed, has it? Nothing has changed. But, anthropomorphized dogs, it's very heavy, especially in the beginning. Essentially, there are 2 dogs that have escaped in animal testing and research facilities. So, like, the first, 50 pages, Techtic kept being like, oh, do you hate the book? Like, it's taking you forever to get through this. And it was just because it was very heavy stuff. So I'd read a chunk and I'd be like, okay, I gotta set this down.
That's
for a
not how
little
I
bit.
said it. I wasn't like, oh, do you hate it? I was like, are you enjoying it?
He was very concerned that I didn't like the book, but I did. It's a very good book. But yeah, it was very tough to start just because of the heavy material. But yeah, much like Watership Down, anthropomorphized dogs, then once they escape, it kind of follows their travels. And as per the name of the book, the media basically drums up this hysteria that they were exposed to the plague in the animal testing facility. I don't want to spoil whether they were or not, but basically then the chaos that ensues as a result.
Sweet. Books. Reading. Gotta love it. Well, right on. I think that leaves just little old me. As for myself, I have an announcement, which Stephen Keller is not going to be a fan of. Sorry, Stephen. I think I got to move on from Blasphemous. I think I'm moving on. And the reason and what's going to cause a lot of soul searching, and already has caused a lot of soul searching for me over the recent days, is that I'm just not good enough at games to do well playing it. And it's just like, I think I got to a point, I imagine it's about halfway through. I actually don't know. I know I've explored something like 70+% of the map, and it's just getting very challenging and frustrating to play, which is not what I'm looking for in my daily or day-to-day casual gaming experience. So considering that I got it for like $3, I'm moving on. I do want to say that in spite of that, and kind of similar to the experience I had with Returnal, I really like the game a lot. I had a really good time playing it. I think I need to start normalizing playing games and not beating them. In particular, games like that are like ostensibly a Souls-like that are particularly challenging. I read online it's not as difficult as like Hollow Knight, but it's still fairly difficult. So I'm trying to work through those feelings right now. Otherwise, for myself, this weekend I did something that I do every year. I'm sure I've mentioned it on the podcast before. I want to recommend it, as I always do. Your local movie theater may or may not be playing all of the Oscar-nominated animated short films all in succession. So you can basically go to your theater, buy a ticket, and watch all 5 of the nominated movies. And it is like an hour and a half, like a regular movie would be. And you basically get to see 5 little stories. And I will say the crop of short films this year were all fantastic. Usually there's 1 or 2 that sticks out that aren't as good, but that was not the case this year. They were all really, really wonderful, little lovely stories. So I have to just recommend going to do that if you're so inclined. Finally, I've also started reading a new book because I did finish the book I was reading previously, which was The Greek Coffin Mystery by Ellery Queen. I have now moved on to a book called High Fidelity by Nick Hornby. And if the author's name sounds familiar to you, or if the book's name sounds familiar to you, it's because Nick Hornby's written a lot of stuff that has been turned into movies. He also wrote About a Boy and Fever Pitch, as well as at least one other movie that I can't think of right now. But High Fidelity was a movie from I think the late 80s with John Cusack. I have not watched the movie. I started reading the book because I got it at a used bookstore for like $1. And so far, it's great. It's a complete change of pace, which is kind of what I was looking for. Ostensibly, it's a comedy, which is kind of a weird thing to say about a book, but it plays like a comedy movie would in a lot of ways, which is probably why it was made into a movie. So when I'm done reading that, I will probably watch the movie at some point and just kind of see how it compares. In particular, the book takes place in the UK, and I know the movie takes place in like Chicago, so that alone will make things a little bit different, but curious to see how that all shakes out. And yeah, that's kind of the extent of things for me and the extent of things for us and this show, or at least this week's rendition of the show. So if you liked what you listened to, you can head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Consider leaving us a review. Hit us up on Blue Sky at the handles mentioned right at the top of this episode if you want to have a chat with us about anything we talked about in the show or on the secret segment or anywhere you've listened to us. Tell your friends. You can also stay safe, and you can also keep on podcasting.
He does it again, folks.